Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Friday. Today is April the 10th, 2015, and today's webinar is it's number 145, Andy Stapleton, Classes Part 3. I'll say it again, Classes Part 3. So it's all yours, Andy.
Good morning, everybody. Um, we've gone through a couple of different things. One is just a basic outline of classes and a few things they do. We've gone through the abstract classes, or what I call the base classes that do a lot of the information. And now we got to get to how we're going to handle our files and our data and things like that. So one of the things that we've got to have is we've got to have a file manager class, and we're going to go through two pieces of this. One of them is the file manager class, and one of them is a short deal on UML. And then the next time we talk, we'll go through UML in depth. But right now, we're just looking at the file manager class. Now, some of you that's already downloaded the repository and downloaded the different things, you've probably done a little perusing through and saw the file manager class, file management class that I've got in there, and you're thinking, what in the hell? This thing's got all kinds of stuff in here. Obviously, things grow. You need more little tools, more little pieces, more little chunks, and so you build those things into your file manager class to handle different situations. But basically, the file manager class has got to manage the files, and these are the items that it has to do in the file manager class. It's got to be able to go get the data. It's got to fetch the data that's out there. It's got to find the data that you want. It's got to do any add, change, and delete to that data. It's got to manage the array of the results of whatever you fetched in the array.
Hey, Andy.
Yeah.
We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, why? You should be seeing that. You're not seeing that manager list? I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it.
We did a moment ago. Okay, go ahead. I'm not seeing it, but as long as you're seeing it.
Are you seeing it, Pete, and the rest of everybody?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay.
Now I see it.
It's just you then.
Yeah.
Okay. Back the truck up. Let Tim catch up with us. Anyway, the file manager class, basically it handles whatever result set or whatever information that you got. It's you got to fetch the data, find the data, got to manage the add, change, and delete functions, got to manage the array, which is whatever you fetch, which is the record set. It's got to manage an individual record of that array, and it's got to refresh an existing record that you're fixing to update or change or whatever you're going to do. That's basically all it has to do. Everything that's wrapped around that is to handle situations that deal with those 6 items in the file manager array, on the file manager class. So keep that in mind. Don't let it overwhelm you. Don't let it think that there's so many things in here you have no clue what's going on. That's basically it in a nutshell. That's what it's supposed to do. And it's doing that one for each file. Okay, so if you've got 10 files in your analysis, you're going to have 10 file manager class, one for each one of them. If you have 100, you're going to have 100. If you have 200, you're going to have 200. It's just the way it works. And that way, each one of them manages each file separately. Now, there are schools of thought to try to make a generic one that can handle anything, so that way you can go do it. I'm not that sophisticated with it. A lot of times when I've tried to make things a little bit more generic, I've ended up having to make small changes here and there, and it gets real convoluted. So I keep things a lot more simpler, and I have one per file as I go through, and I don't worry about it after that. Okay, so what we're going to go through today is let's go through the repository and open the file manager class itself, and let's go through the pieces and understand what we're doing here as the class functionality. And I'm going to zoom in the code just a little bit because everybody usually likes to do that. How's that? I think that's pretty good myself. So
yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, the file management class, obviously we got to declare the class. And you remember last time we talked, we had the CCS manager class, which is the abstract class of methods to actually do the file, add, change, delete, and a few other things, but that's basically it right there. So we inherit from it. You can inherit from multiple classes if you want. The unfortunate thing is that does not work in mobile, so I've tried to do a single chain 1-to-1-to-1, so that way I only inherit from one class to kind of resolve that. Then we have a few internal variables that we've got to use here. These are private variables, which is a refresh, a modified by, and a screen ID. What that allows me to do is set that and basically do my timestamps on my records without having to do that every time I add a record. I just, I manage the record itself, and I set these when I declare the class. So I can do the modified and the screen date and just run through it, and there's one more, which is the date timestamp. The last thing is you'll see that there's a rec is UML class, and array rec is array of UML class, and thread is UML class. Ignore the UML class for the moment. We'll go back over that when we get into the UML functionality, but basically that is an error on purpose. It's telling me that I need to change that name to whatever I've generated as the file in the UML class area. So those are there on purpose. But you do have to declare the rec, and you'll notice that there's a little function here called dynamic. Rec is UML class dynamic, and that's private because it does not need to be public. I'm not going to be using it public. It's only used in this class and this class only. The dynamic is a directive that says, whenever I'm referencing a record in the array and using rec, then I want to point, and any changes I made in rec will be reflected in the same memory space. That's what the dynamic's for. Say, let me use the same memory space of this variable as the array record that I'm looking for. This is very powerful because it allows me to go get the 5th record in the array, make a change to it, and I don't have to do an update of the array or go fetch the array again. I don't have to do either. I just made a change and it's done. And it's very clean that way, and you'll see that later on how we use that. Publicly, we want to be able to go to our program and use certain things. One is the array rec. This is the array of records that I've retrieved, and it also is going to be referencing whatever UML class I have. And then I have an AAR thread. We had gone down the path of trying to figure out a way to thread to refetch on occasion the data structure and update the array as we do that. We were not as successful as what I wished we would be, and that had to deal with more of memory constraints between multiple threads going back and forth, and it would hang up. It just wasn't as successful. Version 20 has come out now with the parallel task, which is basically using another core of the CPU at the same time. That's where this is going to go. I'm going to use the parallel task for this, so there'll be some updates, and we'll go back over when I go through utilizing the parallel tasks in order to speed up your program and things. This is how we'll use it, and we'll go through it. So that's just there at the moment. It's just a declaration. The last thing we got is the global area. This is what things that are global to us and the parent class that we're in, which is that CCS manager class. This is how we declare who is what. We got the PK field name, which is your primary key field name. We got the DB file name, which is your database file name. And then I have an alias file name, which is basically a short version of the DB. So if you have customer address is the name of the DB file, you can put CA as the alias, and it'll generate it. Okay. Several little properties in order to update those private variables, which is fine, and constructor in order to assign those variables, destructor to get rid of them, and then we get down to the fetch data. Now, fetch data is how we're going to get our information into the array. You do not have to use SQL. If you're using the hyperfile, you can certainly do filter and just array equals the file and put it in, add it to your array and you're off and running. You don't have to use SQL. Since I primarily work with MS SQL and Postgres, I use the SQL statements in order to make it as efficient as possible for the system. So you can
also use hyperfile queries.
You can use anything. Yeah, you're right. You can use hyperfile queries in here as well. That's true. Thanks for the insight. I forgot because I don't use them. So anyway, however you want to use them, whether it be a query, whether it be a direct file access, or SQL statements, the major thing is you're moving the data to the array. Okay? So we got to kind of look at this. Now, you've got some memory limitations. Remember, you're working with a memory array. So, you don't want to just go get 190,000 records in one shot and throw them to your array. Eventually, you're not going to do very well. You want to do filters, and you want to keep the data down to exactly what you need. That's number one. But let's kind of go over this because I don't know how many people use a lot of the string build, but this is a very powerful tool. What string build does is basically take these numbers, the %1, %3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and replace them with whatever value in the fields that we want. And no, they don't have to be in order. Obviously, you can see they're not in order. So let's kind of go over that for a second. %3, which is in two places here, is my alias file name. And let me kind of give you a clue what this will look like after the statement is over with, and I'll write the exact statement here so that way you can see what I'm driving at. So this statement is going to end up to be select asterisk, comma, cuss asterisk from account as ACC, and then you've got inner join customer as cuss on cuss dot account ID equals account. I'm sorry, I messed up here. This got to be right here. Account ID. Okay. And then you can put an order by and a couple other things in there. So let's put our where clause as where account dot account ID equals 10 as an example. All right. So how do you build that statement based upon what you see up there? Well, the 3 is the ACCT. So you get that automatically plugged in there based upon what you're looking for. We also have a join field list, and that is something you can use inside your program, and we will use that, and I'll show you how that works. That's where we're putting the cuss asterisk there to get everything out of the customer file. The from statement is here, and the %2, it comes from the DB file name. This, again, is the same thing from the %3, and then you've got your inner join, which is your %5 from the inner join statement here, and then your filter string is your where clause, and you can actually put an order by as well if you want to. But just building the entire select statement on the fly is what it's doing. So anyway, the next step is, of course, we got to execute that query, roll through this thing, and the last thing is we can set the type fetch. We can tell it to either do the entire file, we can do it a page at a time, we can do it a record at a time, And if we don't specify anything at all, we're going to do the same thing the entire file or the entire thing is. Okay? So now, the last thing, of course, we got our error handling, and then I've got in some auto check data. So however I want to do this to fetch the data, the only thing it's going to do, the major thing that it's going to do is in the array field. The array field then catches it, and it's off and running. Okay? Once I've got all that data, boom, it's now in the array. I can display it on a table and go on from there. So let's go to the fetch record. Now, one of the second thing is that anytime you press the update or change record, we need to be able to refresh it from the database in order to make sure it's got the latest values in it before when the user changes things. This is where we use a combination of different things, a combination of both the CCS manager class as well as the file manager class. We send from the code in our program the system ID, which is the primary key ID, and whether we want to refresh, and that is usually defaulted to be true. Sometimes we want to just get it from the array without refreshing it from the database, but most of the time we want to refresh it from the database, so I set that defaulted to true. I declare the return value. I go get it from the array index, which all it is very straightforward, is sort the index as a member and then return the value. This is now, as you can see, went to the CCS manager class. These are all the base classes that says, go get me the data from whatever we're working with and send it back. We're using a combination of our indirection to do this and the values that we put in the primary key field name and the primary database names. Those things right there is what we use. When we come back, if we find it and the ret val is greater than 0, that means we found a record. We know we found a record. Now we're going to go get that from the array field and put it in that dynamic value. If that says, yep, let's go refresh it, now we're going to go back to the CCS class, and you can see it right here. We're going to go ahead and go get it based upon what we're doing here. This is a key part. You'll notice that if I've set a flag here, I can actually refresh it from a web service. This is for mobile. I don't necessarily have to do it from a DB file name, but I do have it as an HREAD seek first to the DB file name, and if I find it, I return true. Now, you say, well, you're not returning the record. Well, once I do the hfounddb file name, where is it? It's in the file record. I have to do something with it, but it is in the file record, and I can do something from there. Well, if I do something from there, the last step is I got to move it from the file to memory. That's what this key part is here. It's moving it from whatever the record that I just did the hread seek first to the record. Now I've got it in the record, and I can do what I want to do with it, which is, in this point, I'm either fetching it to display something on the screen, or I'm fetching it just before I do a add, change, and delete is usually what it is. I've got another one. It's called fetch by index. This is when I know what the index number in the array is, go get it, bring it back. Almost the same code. The only difference is I already know what index it is. Now we're getting into the save record. I use a common method to do the add, change, and delete. So that way all I have to do is tell it, oh, here's my record, here's my new record, change it or delete it or add it, do whatever I want to do with it. Okay? So let's kind of go through this. I'm going to send a record, the entire record structure, to this function. I'm going to send the primary key ID to it, and I'm going to send the action that I want done. And the action is either going to be an add, change, or delete. There may be a couple more, but basically that's it. I'm going to go ahead and preset my return value to false. That means it didn't work. But if it's an add, I'm going to declare a new version of the class, which is what I've got to do. And then I do a deep assign, basically move the matching values into the record structure. This is the difference. This is the one that we've declared internally in this class, and this is the one we're sending to the class to say, do your add, change, and delete with. This is very important as a difference, because if this was dynamic, this ARG record that I'm sending it was dynamic, and this was dynamic, you would never get a change in your code. Nothing would work. You would say, well, it's not changing the value I changed. Well, that's because you're basically sending it the same thing. You're pointed to the same memory space. You didn't change anything. So what we do is we send it a clean version with the changes, and we say, okay, now move all those clean versions to the internal record structure. Move that now from my memory back to the file. Okay. And then I'm going to go do the rec save out of my CCS manager class, which is now going through and telling me that I am going to add either via just a regular add, or add via web services, or however I wish to need to do it from add, change, or delete. And those are common function that now does the hadd, hmodify, and hdelete. Now, from this standpoint here, since it's an add, I got to do an extra. I got to do two things extra. Instead of going back to the database and reselecting everything to redisplay the record, all I'm going to do is say, I already got the record. I just need to move it to whatever my changes in case, because I get the ID on a brand new record, on an auto increment record, I get the ID number. So I got to do the file to memory back again from what I just did the hadd to, back to the record, and then I'm going to add it to my array. So what that's done now is I can insert a brand new customer that doesn't have an ID. The act of the rec save will give it an ID, and then I move it back to my memory structure so I have that information, and then I add it to the array, and I don't have to refresh it from the database. Okay? Now, that's not saying that sometimes you may not have to do that. If you've got some triggers and other stuff that fill in information that you normally wouldn't be there, you would need to do, another step, maybe do a refresh by ID to get it back with all of those sub-elements that you've done. But for the most part, this is the simplistic part. It works. The last thing I want to do is I want to send that ID that I just got back to my program. So I get the ID immediately by just reassigning the record structure back to my past record. So now I get the ID to the program, and I'm off and running. Obviously, the change is slightly different. The change now is either going to go fetch the record by either web service if that's set, or it's just going to go fetch the record. The fetch record, we've been through that. All it does is go get a brand new version of that record, make sure what it is, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did above. I'm going to move my new version of the record to where all the changes are into my just refreshed record. I'm going to move that memory to file, and then I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to move it back with any changes that's there, and I'm going to update those changes back to my program again. Last one is the delete. Again, same, refresh the record, make sure I got the right value, move that in there so I have that, do a memory to file, do a rec save, which deletes it. The only thing difference is that since I have fetched the record, I know the index, so I'm going to delete it from the array so it disappears. That's what I'm going to do. Now, if you notice that the return value comes back from each one of these functions, what that's doing there is telling me that there was no error in the hadd, hmodify, or hdelete. That's what it's doing. It's telling me there's no error. And whatever comes back from there is what I turn a result. So that's either going to be true or false. So either I did the update or I didn't. I'll let the program then handle any error functionality from that point. And we're done. So how many times do I have to code in here? I don't ever have to. I rarely get in here and have to change anything based upon the need of that particular file. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't. So it's other than explaining to you what it does, that's the last time most of the time you need to even mess with it. It is good that once you've done this, to go ahead and do a trace step through. In other words, go ahead and do a debug and step through the entire process. It'll help you understand what's going on in there. And, an understanding of where your classes are rolling and what they're supposed to be do certainly helps, rather than just getting them and crossing your fingers that my programming is as good as what you expected it to be and doing exactly what you think it should do. That's one of the things. Now, all of these are modifiable, so you can do what you want with them. The log changes is a buffer that I've got in there that if you do have a change log by XML, basically what this is doing, this is an extra thing that I have in here. If you create a table called change log, what it will do is make an XML version of whatever that record is at that time and then add that to the log. That's what it does. So I get an XML of whatever the record looked like each time they change one. That's what that's for. Pete put this one in. This is a field this is directly due to a good friend of ours out of Franklin, Tennessee, that the field names that he's being able to search by is not the primary key field names. So we're having, we do a different one that says, okay, we can go fetch the record by any other field that you have in the system instead of the primary key. That's what that's for. Fetch by thread, this is the last step. This is dealing with this will all change based upon the functionality of that parallel task. So I wouldn't even worry about it at the moment. That's basically the file manager class, and what we do with it is what's important. Okay, the file manager class of everything that we're doing really has to deal with how we manage this and what we're going to do with those as we do them. Just a second here, and I will bring up, I thought I had one. Okay, I'm going to bring up a program here, and we'll see these things in action and what I do with them from here, which is kind of what everybody wants to do. A lot of people that went to the developers class or the developers conference last year got a copy of my budget programming that I use, and don't really care what you do with it. It is an exercise that makes my wife happy, makes me happy that I can watch what she's doing, and we just go on and life is good. But it's good exercise because everybody's got checkbook, and hopefully everybody's got money unless they have a wife. And if you repeat that, you're in trouble. So anyway, we'll take a look at this. Right there it is. Okay. So what we do now is we need to use these and set these things up to be able to run them and utilize them. Hopefully I got the right one. We'll know in a second if I got picked the right one. And I've got a little bit better at my organization of the system as time has gone by. You'll come to find out that a big chunk of your setup for your joins to move information together and things like that is a lot easier if you go ahead and preset all that stuff. So I've done that. Really, I don't know. The only way that I can think in my mind, unless you use SQL and or queries, the only other option is queries, is that if you use the HF file structure by itself, when you're looking up information, you've got to from another file, then you've got to utilize and do a lookup to the other file and bring it in, then merge the information together is what you end up doing.
If you use a file, if you use a query, it would be the...
That's what I'm saying. The query, you can
Right.
do that automatically, but the file by itself, you really got to open up the other file, go fetch it, and bring it back. Well, I don't do that. I have ways to get around it since I use the SQL. And I will, what I will do in my element code here is one of the things that I'll do is I will have a setup. I'll have a setup master queries, which takes all of the different declarations of the classes, and if I need to do any lookups like inner joins or things like that, I'll set them all up in there without the where clauses. And that way I've got all the data necessary. And it works out beautifully. It works out nicely. But the first step that I do, obviously, other than connecting to my databases, which we do above there, the first step I do is I go ahead and I declare whatever classes I need. Now, there's two schools of thought to that. One is the true academic version is you don't declare it until you need it. Then you get it and you go on from there. The problem with that is that sometimes you want to globally use it across multiple forms or multiple screens, or have basically records that goes across different things. And especially if you're using the dashboard stuff, you may want to have that record in multiple areas in order to manage it. So I don't normally do that. It's not saying I don't do it, but normally I'll declare the record up front here first. I'm not going to execute necessarily any data queries on it or execute any fetches on it, but I'm going to at least declare it here so that way if I need the record for accounts record in another form, I already know what it is. Let's use practicality. If I go select the account in my bank that I want to use, well, no matter which window I'm on, whether I'm putting in a check or I'm doing deposits or whatever I'm doing, I'm going to use that account. Okay, so why not declare it globally and use it globally? Well, that's what I'm doing here. That's the reason why you see it here, is because that's exactly what we're doing. I set the account up front, boom, no matter which screen I'm on that account. I'm using that account. Another method that I use that same thing for is I use it for my user logon record. So instead of having a global variable for my user ID and my global variable for my security and a global variable for his name and a global variable for this, I declare user record is my security record, and then when they log on, that stays static throughout the entire program, and I don't have any global variables. In itself, it's a global variable, and I don't have to worry about it no more, and I know every time I access user record, it's done. It's there. If it's not there, something's wrong. I usually have a check, kick them out, and say, your user record's gone. Relog on, try it again. Coffee time. Last thing is I get the version numbers from the exe. I set up my debug or my bugging program and my automatic upgrade program, set it up, and rock and roll. Okay. Let's go through a couple of things here. Just to talk about the UML. Now, this may want me to do something. We'll see what happens. I guess it won't. Good. UML is Unified Modeling Language. Basically, there's all kinds of schools and stuff. Some people use it extensively. I use it mainly to generate the base classes of the record themselves. Okay? And you can do that via your analysis. There's two ways to do it. In your analysis, when you set up all of your tables that you've got here, when you generate it, if you're using a UML, it will ask you to update the UML diagram. You say yes, and it generates one of these nice little blocks here. And when you look at that nice little block, it's got every one of the fields that are from the analysis table. I'm done with it. I'm happy with it. There's not a whole lot to do. From here, when I open up the class diagram or I create the class diagram, it's going to do two things. One, it's going to get all of the classes from that match the analysis. So when I look in here and see all these, this is from the analysis. But when I look at the transaction class, that is that file manager class that I did a save as and created. So it's pulled in everything from it and all of the functionality and stuff that I put together from it. Now, you can utilize this to create all your properties. You can utilize this to create everything that you need to do. Personally, to me, I don't. I think that it's just as easy for me to create the property in the class and let the class update the UML, because that's one function that it will do. So if I go into transactions and I go into the code, that brings up a transaction class here, and that is everything that is there. This is all the fields that is in the actual analysis, and these are different properties that I put together for deposit expenses, different things like this. I can actually put in methods and other stuff, but it generated this exactly the way it is, and all I did was add some properties to it. And when I added the property, it would, when I went back to the model, it would say update the UML, and I said yes. So you want to keep them in sync. You can't just forget about it. You keep them in sync. But I don't have to type in, and I don't have to do all of this all of the time. Now in version 20s, there is a related, classes related thing. I have not found out the syntax to it or the details to it, but that's something that I'm going to explore because there's certain ones of these that I want to put together. Let me see if I can find one that I've added stuff from another table. Should have at least one. May not. Yeah, profile and a bank account should have it with the profile. It's got the profile ID. We'll do it. If I need to bring over information, I'm doing a select state where I'm bringing over information from another deal. One of the IDs here, so you got an account ID with a profile ID. I don't really need to do that, but in order to do a select statement that has the two of them lined up together, in other words, give me the name of who's on the account along with, from the profile along with the account ID, well, I've got to have the fields to select. One of the original pieces that I've had to do is what I'll do is I'll take the, let's see, we need profile. I'll take the class for profile, and basically I'll just copy whatever fields I want over here. I don't want to duplicate that, but I got everything else I need. Okay, so let's say I don't need any of this stuff, but I just need those items. That's all I need. So I put those items in there, and now I have those fields in that class. When I save that class, this is what I mean about what it's going to do. When I go back to the analysis or the model, and I then tell it or close it, usually most of the time it's closed, so I don't have it open. Let's say I close the thing. And I open it. Well, it's supposed to anyway. I can synchronize with the code. Synchronize with the code. That's what I do, and then it'll come in there. And when I look in that same bank accounts, there it is. If I look in here, you'll see that it'll add those fields to it, and you're off and running. Okay. Probably would help if I saved it. But now that I have that, I can literally go over here and do an inner join and set up where I can pull both of those fields together and use them in the program. So how do you use them on a screen or on a table? Since I've got all that, what I've done is taken that same file manager class, okay? And the only thing I've done, you remember looking at this, I've changed all the UML class variables. Remember that error? I changed it to whatever my account is. This is who I'm working with. This here is exactly the files that I'm doing here. So I go straight over to that UML class that I just had. Come back, I'm good to go. I set up the array field is there. I put the primary key in. This is the file name of the record, and then I put the alias in there. Okay, the alias is what I want to do. It's an account. Nothing else. There's only one other spot that gets changes. So really, I just do a search and replace is all I do. The only other spot that gets changed is down here in the add, change, and delete. That's where you'll see it again. So I do a search and replace on UML class, whatever it is, I'm done. 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, I'm done by the time I get to this line and search and replace. I don't have anything else to do. Once that's done, I'm ready to use that and go from there. So let's look at a window where I've actually used it. That's it. So this is the listing of the bank accounts. If I go in here, the first thing out of here is I'm going to declare the record. So that way I know what the record is. I'm going to tell me what screen I'm in. This is from my debugging. And I'm going to do a refresh window down here. And this is because of the dashboard. Usually I do an init, but if you got a refresh window, you don't do the init. And all that does is I do a filter. Okay, the filter says, well, I want my profile. Well, the profile record is my user record. That's what they logged in as. Again, we talked about the global user ID, global user record. Well, it's a profile record in this program, so the profile is set across the board. And I do that string build where the account profile ID equals %1, and I set the profile ID. I do a fetch data. You're done. Once that's get it, I'm going to look and see whether or not I need to update or add another record. The reason behind this is that if it's empty, I want to do an init. I want to clean everything and make sure it's all right. Otherwise, I don't really want to move my cursor from where it's at, so I'm just going to do a current selection so that way it adds a new account to the bottom in case somebody else is doing that. Hopefully not, but in case there's new records in there. And now that array is then assigned as a variable into the content. So there's my bank account data. I assign that AAR rec, which you saw in the deal, to this, and then each one of the fields is then linked to a value within that record, is what it is. Okay? Now, one of the cool part is Mr. Current Balance is a variable record. In other words, it's not even a field inside the database. It's calculated on the fly, so it's never wrong. Isn't that slick? So, one thing that I need to do, and I'm going to show you a little bit on the UML on this. Let me see if I got it here. I do have reconcile. I have not done reconcile in this thing here, and my wife's been fussing at me. So what I'm going to do is I have the reconcile record here. This is the UML transaction of it. And what I'm going to do is I don't think I have the reconcile class from the file manager class. No, I don't. Good. So the only part that I've done here is I've imported the reconcile table, or added the record to the analysis and allowed it to generate the UML, and I got to take it from there. So the UML is showing this. If I've got it on the UML, then the only other step is I might want to generate the code, which I don't have to because it's already there. So the only thing I've got to do now is I've got to make it work. So remember the repository. It's in essence read-only. So what I do is an open. From here, I go to the repository where I had my repository, and I just type in, give me the file manager class. All right, now that I've got the file manager class, since it's read-only, I can't change anything, can I? But I can do a save as. This is a key part about organization. This is what I do. You don't have to, but this is what I do. Anything that deals with my file management class, I name it the table name class. So this one's going to be reconcile class. Once it's saved, all I need to do is search for UML class, change that to my file name, which is reconcile, and say replace all. Should give me 6.
You might want to only do that for the current element instead of all project elements. So.
Well, usually I only have one at a time, so you're right. You're absolutely right. But I don't try to have multiple save as to do this, so it doesn't ever.
Your search is searching all project elements.
I understand that, but I only have UML class in this file. Period.
Oh, I got you. Okay, yeah, because all the others have already been.
Right. Let's put it this way: if I see more than 6, you're right. I'm going to say, well, where do I have 7 and 8? Because I shouldn't. It should only be 6. Period. So I do that. It updates it. Now all those are done. The only thing I've got to do is put in my PK file name. So that's going to be reconcile ID. That's what I name them. Reconcile here. And then I'm going to call it recon, because I already use rec, so I don't want to use that. So I got recon as my alias. That's all I got to do. Everything else is already done. So this really makes it quick. Once I've saved that, well, I can declare it. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to come down here, and I usually try to keep these in alphabetical order. This one obviously isn't. But I come back here, and I say reconcile data is reconcile class. See the class? We're done. Now that's already taken care of that process. That's taken care of. Now we got to create the screen for it. I'm not going to create the screen today. This is what we'll go through next time. We'll create the reconcile screen and all the code to go with the reconcile to show you how that's done. Okay? And what it's going to do is it's going to take that class, it's going to build a screen for the reconcile. We'll build a whole reconciliation screen on our next class, which will show you how to use one of these, and then you'll be able to go from there. Yes, I'll do a backup of this and put it back out there for everybody to have it to this point. And I may have to go back in and do a cleanup. This is now going to be version 20. If you do not have version 20, you'll need to holler at me so I can give you version 19. This is now going to be version 20 because I just upgraded it.
Or holler at me.
Or holler at him. Yeah. Tim has version 19 also. And if you already downloaded version 19...
I think Tim was saying holler at him and get...
Oh, holler at him to get version 20. That's right. I'm telling you, talking about a brain fart. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to be so forward, but yeah.
Yeah, be forward. Be forward. I mean, I'm used to it. Remember, Pete's always around, so I'm used to that.
Yeah, but that's not what these webinars are all about.
Well, it's true. I mean, there are some very, just a 5-minute discussion of 20. I have moved all of my WinDev code to 20 now. The only thing it hasn't is the WebDev stuff. The WebDev stuff is still in 19. And it's not because of one way or another. It's just the majority of the WebDev stuff that I've got right now is all in version 19. And before we start a full conversion of that, we want to look at redevelopment of some areas first. So we just haven't done it. But all of my WinDev code, and I've already started working on some mobile code, and both of them are working very well. A few minor little issues, but nothing, everything that I could do in 19, I can do in 20 without an issue. I have not ran into anything that worked in 19 that's broken 20. Okay? So, so far so good. Now there's some new features that we've done. I've already been playing with the mapping, which is pretty slick, which I think we kind of showed you a little bit of that. We've certainly enhanced that. And Glenn's going to be putting that in his version 20 class material. So he's going to have mapping stuff in his class material for WinDev in his version 20 stuff. So if you don't have Glenn's class material, I strongly suggest that you look into it because it's going to be very, very good for him and very good for you. He's got a lot of nice deals. A lot of this stuff we kind of collaborate together with. Glenn does a lot of excellent work towards making sure that it's simple to understand how to use. Good stepping off point too. So I highly recommend that you go ahead and look at jumping into 20. There's supposed to be a patch out. I don't know if it'll be the final or another little patch in between, but it's supposed to give us the additional functionality on the parallel task and a couple other things that's been out there pending. And when that happens, we're definitely going to have another webinar on that. And again, for DEF CON, which again is something you need to talk to Tim about going to DEF CON down on Amelia Island this fall. I'm going to go through the entire mapping program for both WinDev and mobile, including Follow Me. What we'll probably end up doing if my wife's around is we'll send her off and I'll turn on her phone and we'll watch where she drives, which will be fun. Don't tell her I said this, but I'll just hook it on her phone and we'll play spy on where Belinda drives around is what we'll do. And we'll look at the mobile technology for both the mapping, Google Maps, and everything can be done with it, as well as the WinDev and everything can be done with it as well, which is good. And I believe they got it in WebDev too. So if it is in WebDev, then that's Pete's issue. Pete can manage that if he's going to show that. The second thing is I'm going to get in depth on the parallel task functionality. That's the second major thing that I'll be discussing down there and teaching down there with the classes and stuff like that. So we'll be going in and working through this stuff in a class management systems to make it just basically plug in stuff is what we'll end up doing. Is there any questions on what I've gone over?
I don't see any questions on this side.
Either damn I'm good or everybody's asleep. We'll go with damn I'm good.
Okay.
No arguments there.
No. Is that it? Is that it for today?
That's it, bub.
How many more of these?
Crying. Oh.
How many more of these class webinars do you think you may have?
We got one more to do this, and then in essence, I'm done with this, except for if anybody comes up with how to solve a specific problem with the classes.
Okay.
Okay. Because everything, because the final thing is we'll be doing the add, change, delete form and things with it next week, and we might do one more that I can think of, but that'll be just going over the templates of the controls, the add, change, and delete controls, and the save, cancel controls. That would be the only other thing, but that'll only be a shorty, a 30-minute job. It's all we'd have to have for that. So I can do that in concert with someone else.
Okay. Well, beginning next week is going to be a series of webinars from Jeff Graham. He's going to be covering high-profile client server. They probably won't be consecutive weeks. It'll probably be part one next week, part two week after next, or something like that, or 2 weeks away, whatever. But that is coming up. We have other things in the wings too that we're working on. Some other webinars have other presenters that are already lining up to show a few things.
In other words, we're bored of me and it's time to go on.
We'll be announcing those later. And also, Andy briefly mentioned the DevCon coming up this fall, and I can announce it now. It is going to be in Amelia Island, Florida. It'll be the week of 5 October, and the pricing will be, we're going to try to keep the pricing the same as last year, and we'll have
$2.87.
A minute. Yeah, but we'll have similar amenities last year. There'll be there'll be breaks that we'll provide. We will provide lunch each day. I'm also working on maybe having some sort of a little outing one night, or a mixer or something like that. But I'm working on that. Anybody have anything to say about the DevCon?
It's been good every year so far, but I'd appreciate it if somebody else would, kind of pony up here and say, I want to show some stuff too. I mean,
right? Yeah, this
here and Pete all day long. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I'd say Caprice, but I wouldn't want to offend him.
If anyone has anything they'd like to show, let us know. We'll see if we can work it in. Pete, you have anything? Yes, sir, Jeff.
If anyone, I'm going to be covering query building, and if anyone has some particular issues that they've had with queries, they can send me an email, and I'll try and address those.
This is going to be fun.
Except Andy. He can't send any.
Well, on the bright side, though, Andy won't be here next week while you're...
Well, that'll help.
Man, I just can't believe that. That's just wrong. I'm telling you.
Okay, I don't see any questions out here, so...
Pete, you want to handle my light work here?
I've got a couple of queries. I might.
Okay.
They're only 3 or 4 pages long, so shouldn't be nothing.
You can just post them on Skype, and that'll work.
Post them on Skype.
Yeah, this is quickly digressing into a hyperfile versus SQL battle.
Hey, where's your boss? That's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I think
all
this
I
is
can say
come
is
to a final
be
close.
good at it. Okay, guys? Be good or be good at it. I'm sorry. All right?